The concrete swallowed sound in the underground garage. Fluorescent tubes hummed overhead, casting a thin blue light over rows of parked cars and oil stains that never quite went away. Elena Ramirez hugged her right arm to her chest as she walked scrub pants whispering against each other, plastic badge tapping against her hip. It was close to midnight in Denver, cold enough that her breath showed white in front of her. The mile-high medical center rose above her, somewhere a stack of glass and steel she could no longer look at without feeling something tighten behind her ribs. Her keys were in her left hand. Her right hand stayed pressed tight against her body. Every step sent a pulse of ache up through the wrapped wrist she was pretending not to think about. She hit the unlock button once, then again, though the lights on the old Subaru had already blinked. Headlights from a car turning down the ramp swept across the garage. For a second, the light slid over her face, over the gauze, peeking from beneath her sleeve, then moved on. Elena turned in a slow circle, scanning the levels. No footsteps, no voices, just the distant rumble of traffic on Colfax Avenue above and the constant tired hum of the building. She still walked faster. 3 rows back, partially hidden behind a concrete pillar striped in yellow and black paint. Caleb Morgan watched her pass. He leaned against the column with the stillness that had been drilled into him in deserts and alleyways half a world away. His breath came out slow and controlled, vanishing in the chilly air. This was the 4th night he had followed her from the hospital to her car, then at a distance from the car to their apartment. The 4th night she had not noticed taillights staying 3 car lengths back, had not felt a gaze on her in the rearview mirror. That told him more than any conversation could. The Elena he knew counted exits without thinking. She knew where cameras were. She noticed when a stranger lingered too long in a waiting room. It came from years in an ICU where the smallest oversight could cost a life. Tonight she walked with her shoulders hunched, her gaze on the ground a few feet ahead, like someone trying to make herself smaller. She checked the back seat of her car before getting in, yes, but her eyes were glassy, unfocused. Her right hand never uncurled from its careful cradle. Caleb watched her start the engine. The Subaru coughed twice before settling. He memorized the way she sat, with her forehead briefly resting against the steering wheel, eyes closed before finally shifting into reverse. He did not step out. He did not call her name. He waited until her taillights disappeared up the ramp, then pushed off the column and headed for his own truck, jaw tight. Something was wrong. Not work is hard wrong. Not a bad shift wrong. Something on a battlefield wrong, where people moved differently because they had learned to be afraid. To understand how far from normal his wife had drifted, he kept replaying the moment when he first realized the distance between them had started. It had been 2:17 in the morning 3 weeks earlier when Caleb reached across the bed and found nothing but cool sheets. For a moment, half asleep, he thought she might be in the kitchen heating milk the way she did sometimes when a shift clung to her too tightly. The house was small, sound carried easily. He lay still and listened. No clink of mug, no low murmur of the TV, only the faint rush of traffic out on Spear Boulevard and the radiator ticking in the corner. Then he heard water running, not the steady, cheerful rush of a shower. Short bursts, hard and sharp, cut off and started again. In between there was another sound, soft or strangled, like someone trying to swallow a sob before it reached the surface. Caleb pushed the blanket back and stood. Years of Marine training meant he moved out of habit and muscle memory, shoulders, loose weight forward, soundless on bare feet as he walked down the short hallway. A thin line of light glowed beneath the bathroom door. He paused, knuckles hovering for a second before he made himself knock lightly. Elena. The water cut off. There was a beat of silence, then a hurried sniff. I am fine, her voice called too bright, too fast. Hang on. He opened the door anyway. Steam clung to the mirror. The overhead light was harsh, throwing every shadow into high contrast. Elena stood at the sink in her sleep shirt and scrub pants, hair pulled back in a messy knot. Her right wrist was bare, held gently in her left hand. On the counter lay medical tape, a roll of gauze, and a pair of trauma shears. Her eyes were red. She swiped a thumb under one quickly, the way she would for a patient, efficient and impersonal. Hey, she said, shaping her mouth into a smile that did not reach anywhere near those eyes. You scared me. Caleb looked at the wrist she was trying to angle away from him. The skin was swollen and discolored, a bloom of deep purple and green that climbed up toward her forearm, the edges yellowing where it was already days old. What happened? He asked. Nothing big. She reached for the gauze with fingers that trembled. I caught it on the rail of a bed in ICU. You know those metal corners? I should sue the guy who designed them. Her laugh was too thin. It hung in the air for a second, then fell apart. Let me see it. It looks worse than it is, she said. Just a sprain, occupational hazard. Elena. She had spent years watching him watch other people. She knew the tone. For a heartbeat, she met his gaze in the mirror. There it was. Not guilt, not shame. Something else sharp and frightened buried deep. She broke the eye contact first, wrapping the gauze around her wrist in quick, messy circles. I wrapped it at work, she said, but it got too tight. I woke up and it was throbbing. I did not mean to wake you. Caleb stepped closer. Up close, he could see the distinct fingerprint shapes, the way the bruising curved as if a hand had closed around her. Who grabbed you? He asked quietly. No one grabbed me, she said. The words came out too quick. Caleb, I fell. I am tired. Please. I just want to rewrap it and go back to bed. Every instinct in him wanted to take the wrist gently, to trace each bruise to its source, to demand names. Names he could find. Names he could put in a notebook or a scope. Instead, he held himself still. He had learned long ago that charging into the dark without knowing what was there got people killed. You gathered intel. You watched. You waited until the pattern was clear. He exhaled slowly. All right, he said, wrap it. We can get it looked at in the morning. I already had one of the residents check it, she replied, eyes fixed firmly on the strip of tape. They said it is fine. He did not believe that, but he nodded. Back in bed, she lay on her left side, back to him, right arm propped on a pillow. Her breathing stayed too shallow and too quick for someone drifting off to sleep. He stared at the ceiling, watching the red digits on the alarm clock change his mind, already breaking the problem down the way he would any threat. Points of data, behavioral changes, risk. By the time the first light started to seep around the edges of the blinds, he had added another detail to the list. She had lied to him. Not about something small or harmless, but about pain. The next morning, the rituals almost covered it. The coffee pot gurgled in their narrow kitchen. The slot of window over the sink framed a slice of the Rockies peaks, just catching the pale early sun. Caleb poured 2 mugs, added a splash of cream to hers, set it at her usual spot at the tiny table. Elena came in still in her t-shirt and sweats hair and a low-knot phone in one hand. The gauze on her wrist poked out from under the sleeve. He waited for her to come lean against his shoulder the way she always did, head on him half awake. Instead, she sat not quite meeting his eyes, thumb moving over the screen. Her coffee sat untouched. Caleb reached out and laid his hand lightly on her shoulder. Her whole body jolted under his touch. For a fraction of a second, her muscles went rigid, fight or flight, waking beneath her skin. Then she forced herself to relax. Sorry, she said without looking up. I am jumpy. Night shifts. He moved around to grab the cream, reaching across the table. The back of his fingers brushed her right wrist. Elena sucked in a sharp breath and jerked her hand back, knocking her spoon onto the table. Coffee sloshed over the rim of the mug. That was not a bed rail, he said. Color rose in her face. She grabbed a paper towel, dabbing at the spill like it demanded her full concentration. It is fine, she said. They had to tighten a tourniquet on a patient. I helped. It slipped. It is stupid. I will be late if I do not go. She stood too fast, chair legs scraping the floor, and kissed his cheek briefly, already half turned away. The front door closed behind her. The apartment fell quiet. Caleb sat back down slowly and stared at the mug of coffee she had left behind. The steam had already started to fade. He watched it disappear one thin breath at a time and understood that whatever this was, it had already settled into their home like another presence at the table. He pulled his phone from his pocket and opened the Notes app. His thumb hovered for a second, then he began to type. 3 weeks ago, he had not needed to keep a record of his wife. Now he did. The ICU smelled like bleach and coffee, the kind of coffee that had sat too long on a warmer turning bitter and thick. Monitors chimed in a dozen rhythms, a scatter of beeps and alarms, each one tugging at attention in a different direction. Elena moved through it on habit. Check the ventilator. Reposition a patient. Silence an alarm with a quick glance at the screen. Her hands still knew exactly what to do. It was the rest of her that felt out of place, like someone had shifted the floor a few inches to the left. Your wrist looks like hell. Dr. Maya Chen leaned one hip against the counter beside, her dark hair pulled into a clipped bun stethoscope hooked around her neck. Her eyes dropped to the edge of gauze, peeking from under Elena's sleeve. I told you, Elena said. Bed rail. I'm clumsy now. It is a new personality trait. Maya raised one eyebrow. The ventilator behind them sighed. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor alarm jumped its pitch before being silenced. You skipped the ethics committee twice this month, Maya said. You bailed on the night shift pizza. Ben said you left a handoff meeting without arguing with Dr. Ross. That one is historic. I'm trying to be less dramatic, Elena answered. She opened the supply drawer, counting tubing on autopilot. Everyone wins. Maya studied her for a moment longer, then reached for a chart. If you decide to be dramatic again, she said, maybe tell me first. When Maya walked away, the space she left seemed too quiet, even with all the mechanical noise. Elena turned back to the central station. 3 names glowed on the assignment board, highlighted under hers. 3 patients who had arrived in crisis, then stabilized, now occupying that fragile space between danger and discharge. Bed 5, Mr. Harrison. Post-bypass 68, a former mechanic with nicotine stains on his fingers, and a daughter who sent him goofy dog videos. Bed 6, Miss Patel, chronic heart failure, 53 sharp eyes and a soft voice, who had asked Elena to explain every medication twice until she felt she truly understood. Bed 7, Isaiah Reed. 27 car accident ribs, wired lungs, still recovering a scar at his hairline where stitches disappeared into curls. 3 sets of monitors, 3 separate stories, all until recently moving in the right direction. She checked their charts again at the computer scanning labs and vital signs. Heart rates easing down, blood pressures, steady oxygen saturations respectable. For each of them, there was a new order at the bottom of the screen. Cardiovex 13 trial medication Northline Therapeutics protocol signed off by Dr. Lucas Stroud as principal investigator. The first time she had accepted it. New drugs came through ICU all the time. The consent forms looked proper, the signatures neat. The second time with the second patient, she had paused. Same meds, same dose, same reassurance from the attending that it was a promising adjunct, nothing to worry about. The third time, she felt the hair on the back of her neck lift. Patterns mattered here. Certain bed numbers carried reputations. Some attendings ordered tests like rain. Some medications ran in constellations. Cardiovex 13 did not fit any constellation she could remember. The crash came 4 nights later. Mr. Harrison's monitor shifted first. A flutter, a pause, a run of ventricular beats that snapped into a flat line. The room exploded into movement. Elena hit the code button, climbed onto the stool, began compressions, arms locked, counting under her breath. Sweat ran down her spine. She watched his face turn an odd gray, watched the numbers fail to come back. 2 days after his funeral, Ms. Patel went. Then Isaiah. 3 deaths, all with charts that had read improving only shifts before, all on Cardiovex 13. At the end of that week, when her shift finally gave her a few hours without someone calling her name, Elena printed the medication administration records and spread them out in the tiny break room. The fridge hummed beside her, old flyers peeled at the corners on the bulletin board. She lined the pages in 3 columns. Time of first dose, vital sign trends, time of decline. She took a pen and circled the overlaps, the half-life of the drug, the way each crash had started within the same window after dose escalation. Her wrist throbbed as she wrote. She flexed her fingers once, ignored the protest, and kept circling, underlining, drawing thin arrows that connected days and doses. The more she marked, the tighter her chest felt. It was not proof by itself. She was a nurse, not a statistician, but the pattern refused to disappear no matter how many times she looked at it. By the time she sat in front of the computer on the unit, asking herself who exactly she was going to bring this to, the sun, on the far side of the mountains, had already slipped down. The answer came with a mix of dread and something close to certainty. If she went to a mid-level manager, the report would be buried. If she went to a department chief, it would get bounced around in circles. If the problem sat at the top, the only chance it had to be taken seriously was if she walked it right into the office on the top floor. Her fingers hovered over the email keyboard for a long time before she typed the subject line. Patient safety concern related to trial medication. She addressed it to Lucas Stroud. The reply came quicker than she expected. Of course. Happy to discuss. Come by my office tomorrow afternoon, 16 Hazuru. The elevator to the executive floor moved too quietly. No groaning cables, no clank at each level. Just a soft chime as the doors opened to carpet and clean glass and silence. Elena stepped out, suddenly aware of how loud her sneakers sounded. The noise of ICU, so constant it had become background, fell away. In its place, tasteful art-potted plants, a view of the city stretching out in winter light. Snow on rooftops, traffic threading along specks of red and white. The receptionist smiled without using her eyes and waved her toward the inner office. Stroud's door stood open. He rose from behind a desk that gleamed. His suit was navy, his tie a subtle pattern, his hair the kind that took time and a good barber. Nurse Ramirez, he said, crossing the room with a hand extended. Lucas, it is good to finally put a face to the charts. Sit, please. His palm was warm, his grip just right. Not crushing, not weak. Practiced. Elena sat in the chair opposite him and placed her folder on her lap. She could see their reflections faintly in the floor-to-ceiling window behind him, a small figure in scrubs and a man dressed like the city's idea of a success story. She opened the folder and laid out her printouts on his desk. The lines of ink looked thinner here, diminished against the polished wood. I wanted to bring some cases to your attention, she began. 3 patients admitted under different services. All were on the Cardiovex 13 protocol. All had similar patterns of deterioration. I charted the timelines for you. Stroud leaned forward, steepling his fingers, his eyes moving over the pages with careful leisure. You are thorough, he said after a minute. I respect that. There might be an issue with dosing or with inclusion criteria, Elena said. I thought stopping new enrollments until someone can review the data might be wise. He tilted his head slightly. Cardiovex 13 is an exciting compound. We are ahead of a lot of institutions in getting access. There will always be unfortunate outcomes with critically ill patients. You know that better than most. These 3 were listed as stable in the notes, she said. They were trending out of ICU. Their decline began within 24 hours of a dose increase. Correlation, Stroud said, is not causation. The research team will look at these. You can leave the files with me. Something in the way he said leave the files with me made the small hairs along her arms lift. Of course, she said. I will keep my own copies in case anyone needs clarification from the bedside notes. For the first time, the smile on his face did not reach his eyes at all. I am sure that will not be necessary, he replied. His voice stayed smooth, but there was a faint edge under it now. One more thing. I trust you understand the importance of not alarming families or staff unnecessarily. Speculation can be harmful. I have not spoken to anyone but you, she said. Good, let the appropriate channels handle this. She walked out with her folder noticeably thinner and a pressure building behind her eyes. In the elevator, down her reflection looked pale. For 2 days afterward, nothing happened. No memos, no changes to orders. Cardiovex 13 continued to appear on charts. On the 3rd day, just before the end of her shift, she checked her inbox and found a new email. From Lucas Stroud, subject follow-up time, 2047. Please come to my office at 21 Hazard tonight to continue our discussion. After hours is best, so we are not interrupted. She stared at the screen until the letters blurred. 2100 meant the day staff would be gone. Admin offices would be dark. The ICU would still be full of life and noise, but the executive floor would be quiet again, soft carpets and closed doors. She told Maya she had to meet with administration about staffing ratios and left 15 minutes early. She told herself this was what it meant to push a concern to the highest level. The elevator hummed as it climbed. Her fingers tapped against the bandage on her wrist in a small, restless rhythm. The receptionist desk was empty this time. The overhead lights in the hallway were dimmed. Stroud's door was closed. She knocked. Come in, his voice called. He sat at his desk, jacket off now, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a tablet and a stack of papers in front of him. The monitor on his desk cast a cool rectangle of light over his face. Thank you for coming, he said. Sit. She took the same chair as before. The view behind him had turned into a sheet of black glass where the city lights burned in small clusters. I wanted to show you something, Stroud said. He turned the monitor so she could see it clearly. A list filled the screen. Times, dates, usernames, locations, electronic footprints. At the top of each row in a neat column was her login, Ira Ramirez. These are system access logs, he said. According to this, you have been opening restricted files in the medical examiner database. Autopsy reports, trial documentation, confidential correspondence. Many of these accesses occurred when you were not scheduled to be in the building. Elena leaned closer, her stomach dropping as she read the timestamps. I did not open those, she said. I do not even have clearance for the medical examiner database. You are suggesting the system is wrong, he said quietly. I am saying someone used my credentials. Or the logs were altered. The times here are when I was at home. I can show you my schedule, my badge log. You have been asking questions that are outside your role, Stroud continued as if she had not spoken. Reviewing cases, drawing your own conclusions about a complex clinical trial. That is concerning. Now I see evidence that your account has been used to penetrate areas of the system with strict oversight. His words felt like weights settling on her chest. I brought concerns in good faith, she said. Her voice sounded thinner in this room. I followed protocol. I did not break into anything. He stood and walked around the desk. Up close, she could see the veins on his forearms, the gold glint of a watch under his rolled cuff. Look at me, he said. She did. For your own sake, he said, voice low, you need to know when to leave things alone. His hand moved toward her. Before she could step back, his fingers closed around her right wrist, over the gauze, over the fading bruises under it. He tightened his grip slowly, like someone testing the limits of a material. Pain shot up her arm, bright and hot. She tried to pull away. His fingers dug in harder. The room narrowed to the pressure of his hand and the pounding of her pulse against his skin. Stop, she managed. You are hurting me. He twisted just enough to send a fresh burst of pain through the joint. Not enough to break anything, but enough to make her gasp. Then he let go. She stumbled a half step back, cradling her wrist breath coming short. If you keep pressing this, he said, straightening his sleeves with careful precision, you will find yourself blamed for things you did not do. You will lose your position here. You will not find another one in the city. Possibly not in the state. I do not say that as a threat. I say that as a reality. Elena swallowed hard. The monitor behind him still showed her name repeated in a long, accusing list. He moved back behind his desk and sat. You may go, he said. Think very carefully about what you want your future to look like. She walked out into the dim hallway with her wrists throbbing under the gauze and the taste of metal in her mouth. The elevator ride down felt longer this time. When the doors opened on the first floor and the familiar hospital noise washed over her again, it sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else's life. In the parking garage, the air was colder than before. She fumbled her keys twice before getting them into the lock. When the Subaru finally turned over and the heater began to push out the thin warmth, she sat with her hands on her knees, the wrapped wrist resting in her lap. The bruise under the bandage pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She did not tell Caleb that night. When she came through the apartment door, he was on the couch, with a game muted on the TV laptop open on his knees. The lamplight made the room look smaller, softer, like a place bad things could not reach. You are home late, he said. She set her bag carefully on the floor, keeping her right arm close to her side. Floors were short, she answered. I stayed to help. His eyes flicked to the bandage, then back to her face. The pause was small, but she felt it. You eat, he asked. I grabbed something on the way. He did not push. He shifted his legs so she could pass, watched her disappear into the bathroom, listened to the soft click of the door. The pipes in the wall rattled when she turned on the shower. Caleb muted the TV completely. In the bathroom, Elena sat on the closed toilet lid with the shower running for cover. Steam curled around her. She unwrapped the gauze with her left hand, jaw clenched. The marks from Stroud's fingers were fresh, dark prints over old yellowing bruises. The joint was swollen now, the skin stretched tight, glossy. She let herself press her thumb into the sink edge until her nail hurt. That pain grounded her, kept the heat behind her eyes from spilling over. There were two paths in front of her. She could ask for help, or she could pretend she still had control. She turned off the water without stepping under it and wrapped the wrist again tighter this time until the pulsing dulled. When she came out, her hair was still dry. Caleb noticed. He did not say anything. They went to bed in the same positions as before. Her on her left side, back to him. His palm hovered for a second above her shoulder before he set it down on his own chest instead. Sleep hung just out of reach for both of them. The next morning, in the thin light before dawn, Elena was up before the alarm. She sat at the small kitchen table with her laptop open, the screen brightness turned low. A mug of coffee sat at her elbow, forgotten. She typed hospital board Mile High Medical into the search bar. Names and headshots filled the screen. Lawyers, bankers, a retired governor. She clicked through scanning biographies, noting old ties to pharmaceutical companies. She opened new tabs. Northline Therapeutics Trial Oversight. Cardiovex 13 Adverse Events. Whistleblower Retaliation Healthcare Colorado. Each search pulled up articles and case summaries. Some old, some recent. In almost all, the pattern was the same. Someone spoke up, the system, tightened ranks, lives shrank in the shadow of a company logo. Her cursor hovered over a link labeled Department of Justice Healthcare Fraud. She clicked it. The language on the page was clinical calm. It talked about reporting processes protections. It did not talk about the hours alone with a throbbing wrist or the feel of someone's hand closing around your bones. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. She snapped the laptop half shut, hiding the government logo behind a bank of open tabs about continuing education credits. Caleb stepped into the kitchen, hair still messy from sleep t-shirt thrown on over sweats. You are up early, he said. I could not go back to sleep, she replied. Too much caffeine on night shift. He poured coffee, glanced at the laptop, then at her face. Big day, he asked. Just another day, she said. At the hospital, the tempo did not slow. New admits took the beds of those who had left one way or another. Cardiovex 13 kept appearing on orders. When Elena saw the medication name on a chart, something coiled tighter in her chest. At first, she tried to ignore it. That lasted 2 shifts. Then she began keeping her own list. On a small notebook she could fold in half and slip into her pocket. She wrote room numbers, attending names, dosage, changes, the timestamps on orders. She wrote how the patients looked when she checked their pupils or listened to their lungs. She wrote words families said in hallways, whispers that carried more weight than they knew. At home, when the house was quiet, she entered those notes into a spreadsheet on her laptop, fingers moving with increasing speed. Patient identifiers became number symptoms turned into short codes, but the stories stayed vivid in her mind. Caleb noticed the way her eyes stayed on the screen when he came in, the way she closed the laptop a beat too fast. He noticed the way she flinched when an unknown number called, the way she now took those calls in the bedroom with the door shut. He started a list of his own. He kept it in his notes app, hidden behind a nondescript folder name. 3 weeks of changes, it read at the top. Under it, night of wrist injury. Story does not match trauma pattern. Avoids touch. Avoids eye contact when asked about work. New security habits. Walks full circle around car before getting in. Checks mirrors repeatedly, schedule changes not discussed in advance, extra nights, floating to other floors, increased laptop use late night, closes screen on my entrance, tabs medical law government. He did not know yet what the threat was. He knew how his wife behaved under stress. He had seen her come home after codes that ran an hour after talking families through end-of-life decisions. Those nights she talked more, not less. She needed to lay the day out on the table between them, dissect it until it lost some of its weight. This was different. This was silence that had edges. 2 weeks after the encounter in Stroud's office, the gap between them felt like a physical thing. They still shared a bed coffee space, but every shared detail now had an asterisk he could not see. One night, just after 2 a.m, he woke up to an empty bed again. This time there was no shower running. He gave it a minute, then got up. Light glowed faintly from the living room. He stopped in the doorway. Elena had fallen asleep on the couch, half turned on her side, laptop open on the coffee table in front of her. Her hand, the injured one, lay on her stomach, palm up, fingers curled slightly. The bandage had loosened edges, fraying. Caleb moved closer, careful not to step on the loose floorboard that creaked. On the laptop screen, a spreadsheet filled most of the space. Colored cells, columns of dates and numbers. At the bottom, he could make out the label Mortality Analysis. He did not touch the keyboard. He looked instead at the dock of minimized files along the bottom. Blind Study 47, NL will show wire. Consent discrepancies. The browser tabs across the top showed government sites, FDA guidelines, articles about hospital fraud. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and with the brightness down took 3 quick photos. One of the spreadsheet, one of the file names, one of the open tabs. Then he tucked the phone away and stood for a moment listening to her breathing. Her face in sleep looked younger, which made the bruising around the edges of the bandage stand out even more. He closed the laptop carefully until the screen went dark and set a throw blanket over her. She did not wake. In his home office, he plugged his phone into his computer, pulled up the photos, and stared at them. Numbers and file names stared back. He clicked into an encrypted messaging app and scrolled his contacts until he reached a name he had not used in months. Jordan Blake. Jordan had once sat 3 feet from him in a cramped concrete room overseas, both of them watching feeds on a wall of monitors. Now, Jordan worked in a world of code and firewalls, a quiet unit that too many people outside the building forgot existed. Caleb typed, "Need an off-the-record read. Photos attached. Will want to know what kind of trouble this is. Medical, not military. Cannot explain yet." He attached the images and hit send. Hours later, when the sky outside his office window had gone from black to deep blue-gray, the notification pinged. Jordan's reply was longer than Caleb expected. "Your wife is sitting on something big." Mortality count analysis tied to Blind Study 47 suggests 47 subjects. Spreadsheets look like they track dose and outcome. File naming matches internal fraud investigations I have seen. NL probably Northline. Quick open source search connects them to a cardiac drug in trial. I see references in your photos to 14 deaths. That is high. Those Edison-style notes on the side look like someone is building a case, not just venting. Another message followed almost immediately. Also caught a glimpse of a payment log. Delaware LLC with initials LS. That is classic for hiding personal payouts. If that is your hospital's CEO, he is not just bending rules. This is criminal exposure, federal level. Caleb read it twice. He thought of Elena's bandaged wrist, the way she had yanked it away from his touch. He thought of her coffee going cold and the way she now checked the dark corners of their own parking lot before getting out of her car. The shape of the threat sharpened in his mind, shifting from something shadowy and undefined into something with names and numbers and a dollar amount attached. He set the phone down beside the keyboard and let his hands rest flat on the desk for a moment, feeling the grain of the wood under his fingertips. Whatever his wife had walked into, she was not just dealing with bad luck or office politics. She was standing in the middle of a crime. The letter arrived as an email. Subject line: security review and temporary administrative action. Elena read it twice at the nurse's station, the glow of the monitor reflecting in her eyes. The unit around her hummed with its usual chaos. A transport tech pushed a gurney past. Someone laughed too loudly in the hallway. A monitor chirped for attention. Her stomach turned cold. "Problem?" Ben Ortiz asked, rolling his chair closer. He was charting on the next computer, chewing gum like it was a full-time job. "Just HR spam," she said. "Probably another training module." She clicked out of the message before he could see more than the header. 2 hours later, her shift lead told her to head down to Human Resources at 3 on the dot. "They said it will not take long," the lead added, eyes skimming past Elena's face and away again. The HR office sat on a lower floor, warm and colorless. Posters on the wall showed smiling employees with diversity slogans under them. A diffuser puffed something vaguely floral into the air. At the reception desk, a woman with careful hair and nails the color of dark cherries looked up. Elena Ramirez, Elena said. Conference room B, the woman replied. They are waiting for you. Waiting. The door to conference B stood open. Inside, a long table and 3 chairs. 2 of them were occupied. The first was a soft-faced man in a pale shirt and patterned tie, an HR badge clipped to his pocket. The second was a woman in a gray suit with a legal pad and a small recorder sitting in front of her. A hospital counsel if Elena had to guess. Ms. Ramirez, the man said, standing halfway as she entered. I am Greg from Human Resources. This is Miss Adler from our legal department. Please have a seat. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else as she sat. Is there a problem? She asked. Greg folded his hands on the table. His wedding ring clicked once against the wood. We have identified some concerning activity associated with your login, he said. The audit came from our information security team. The word audit left a dry taste in her mouth. What kind of activity? She asked. Ms. Adler reached into a folder and slid a stack of printed pages across. The paper made a soft shushing sound against the table. These are access logs from the past month, the lawyer said. They show your credentials used to enter restricted databases, including the medical examiner's files and trial documentation outside your scope of practice. Elena looked down. Her username sat in a neat column, repeated paired with timestamps that lined up with nights she had been home. I did not access those, she said. I told Dr. Stroud that. Someone is using my login, or the logs have been altered. Greg gave her a sympathetic look that did not reach his eyes. Our systems are very secure, he said. We cross-checked with physical badge swipes. Your ID was used to enter certain floors after hours. I was not here, she replied. I can prove that. My husband can confirm it. There are cameras in the parking garage. Be that as it may, Ms. Adler said, the phrase polished by use, the hospital has an obligation to respond when patient privacy may have been compromised. At this stage, we are not assigning blame. We are simply protecting the institution and its patients. Greg cleared his throat. We are placing you on paid administrative leave for 2 weeks, he said. Effective immediately. Your badge and logins will be suspended while the investigation proceeds. It is a standard precaution. Suspended, Elena repeated. The word seemed to echo. In 48 hours, the lawyer added, if no new information comes to light, your access will be fully revoked in accordance with policy. You will not be allowed in clinical areas until this is resolved. 48 hours. Her mind leaped ahead. Without access, she would be locked out of the very records that proved Cardiovex 13 was killing people. The notes she had were detailed, but they were a map, not the territory. What about my patients? She asked. My assignments tonight. We have coverage arranged, Greg said quickly. You may not return to the unit. He pushed a small plastic tray toward her. Her own badge sat in it, familiar and suddenly foreign. If you would, he said. Her fingers were steady as she unclipped the badge from her scrub top and set it in the tray. She felt the weight leave her collarbone, an absence more than a relief. Do I get a chance to respond to these allegations? She asked. In writing? You will, Ms. Adler said. For now, we recommend you take this time to rest. We will be in touch. Rest. By the time Elena stepped out of the HR suite, her head buzzed faintly. The corridor looked different, as if someone had shifted the focal length on a camera. At the staff entrance, her badge no longer opened the door. Security had to buzz her out. The winter air hit her lungs like a slap. She walked to her car in a straight line, hands in her pockets, the gauze under her right sleeve rough against skin that still ached. Her mind counted steps without meaning to. At home, she sat at the kitchen table again, laptop open, and stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. She had 48 hours before the hospital closed every digital door she could use to prove what had been done. After that, the data would belong entirely to the administration and whatever story they chose to tell with it. There was one place they had not fully digitized yet. The basement of Mile High Medical held decades of paper, old charts, consents, original medication logs. When she had started as a new nurse, she had spent a week down there helping a unit clerk locate a misfiled record. She remembered the chill in the air, the rows of metal shelves. She opened a blank document and started a list. Files needed, trial logs, consent forms, correspondence, anything with Stroud's signature. By the time Caleb came in that night, she had closed the laptop and was chopping vegetables with her left hand. He kissed the top of her head, eyes lingering on the way she kept her right arm tucked. How was HR? He asked. Boring, she said, policy review. He did not believe her. She could see it. He did not press. The distance between question and silence widened. At 2 a.m, while Caleb slept, she dressed in jeans and a hoodie, pulled her scrub top on over it, and drove back to the hospital. The parking lot was half empty. Lights glowed in a few windows, ICU among them, a small square of brightness. She entered through the main lobby. The night guard glanced up, saw the scrub top, and nodded her through without comment. Her heart beat hard as she walked past the elevators to a back staircase. Without her badge, she could not access certain doors, but some places still used keys and old habits. She borrowed Ben's badge earlier that day under the ordinary excuse of forgetting hers at home. It sat in her pocket now. She clipped it on, hoping no one would look closely at the photo. The basement smelled like paper and dust and something chemical. Fluorescent lights flickered on in sections as she walked, buzzing softly. Rows of shelving rose on either side, each loaded with labeled boxes. She found the section marked Clinical Trials and ran her finger along the labels until she saw Cardiovex 13 and Northline Therapeutics. The box she needed was heavy. She pulled it down onto a metal cart and lifted the lid. Inside neatly packed folders, consent forms with patient signatures dated and witnessed, original drug logs written by hand and later entered into the system, letters on hospital letterhead with Lucas Stroud's name at the bottom. She pulled out her phone and began to photograph. Page after page, names, doses, dates, side effects, noted in quick handwriting. A few of the consent forms looked wrong. The same shaky signature repeated. Witness lines with the same nurse's name over and over, even on days that nurse had been off. Her wrist protested each time she held the folder open. She switched hands, jaw tight. Footsteps echoed somewhere in the aisles, slow, unhurried. A flashlight beam swept across the far wall, a white cone moving between shelves. Elena's breath caught. She snapped the box lid back on and nudged the cart silently into the gap between two shelving units, squeezing herself into the narrow space beside it. The metal pressed cold into her back. The smell of cardboard and dust filled her nose. The flashlight beam slid past, then doubled back. It hesitated on the end of the row where the Cardiovex labels glowed faintly. "Anyone down here?" a male voice called, casual, a little bored. She pressed her lips together, forcing herself not to answer. The sound of her own heartbeat seemed loud enough to give her away. The beam lingered for another long second, then moved on. The footsteps faded. She waited until her legs began to ache from holding still before she moved. When she stepped back into the aisle, her hands shook. She put the box back on the shelf, but left it slightly crooked as if someone had checked it for a legitimate reason. Her phone storage warning popped up. She had taken more photos than she thought. Good. In the elevator up to the main floor, she kept her head down, hoodie up. No one stopped her. No one asked why a nurse was coming from the basement at 3 a.m. In the parking garage, the cold felt sharper. Her keys slipped once in her fingers as she walked toward the Subaru. The sound of an engine idling reached her before she saw the car. A dark sedan sat 3 rows over, tucked in near a pillar. Its headlights were off, but the blue glow of a dashboard screen lit the interior. As she neared her car, the sedan's headlights flicked on. The engine revved once. The car did not move. Through the tinted glass, she could just make out the outline of a man in the driver's seat. He was looking directly at her. She knew the shape of that jaw, the angles of that face from board photos and hospital newsletters. Elena's hand froze on her door handle. The air between their cars felt thick. The man did not raise a hand. He did not roll down the window. He simply watched. She forced herself to open the door, get in, and start the engine. Her fingers trembled on the key. For a second before she looked away, their eyes met through the windshields. Lucas Stroud's expression was calm and almost interested, like a clinician observing a subject. As she pulled out of the space, his car stayed where it was, lights cutting through the exhaust in pale beams. She did not breathe properly until she had turned onto the main road, and his headlights were no longer in her mirror. At home, she put the phone on the table and scrolled through the images with shaking hands. Files, signatures, logs, evidence that felt heavy even in digital form. Caleb sat at the other end of the table. He had been waiting, eyes shadowed, arms folded. She looked up and saw something in his face that was not just worry. It was recognition. "We need to talk," he said. She nodded. "I went into the archives," she said. "I have proof. He is going to bury me if I do not move first." Caleb did not speak right away. He looked at the phone on the table, at the rows of images at Elena's face. Her pupils were wide, her skin still pale from the cold of the garage. The bandage on her wrist had a new wet spot where the edge had rubbed open. "Start from the beginning," he said. "All of it. No shortcut." So she did. The trial drug, the deaths, the first meeting in Stroud's office, the access logs on his screen with her name at the top, the way his fingers had closed on her wrist, HR and the suspension, the basement, the files, the sedan in the parking structure, engine idling, Stroud watching her leave. By the time she finished, the coffee in both their cups had cooled and left a dark ring on the table. Caleb sat with his hands folded, silently ordering the information in his head. Names, dates, locations, points of contact. There was a shape there now, not just scattered shadows. "You cannot keep doing this alone," he said finally. "I cannot stop," she replied. "If I walk away, those people just stay dead on paper. and he walks away with a promotion somewhere else. I'm not telling you to stop, he said. I'm telling you we need to treat this like what it is. What is it, Caleb, she asked, because from where I am sitting it feels like suicide. It is a crime, he said, and you are the primary witness holding the case together, which makes you an asset. It also makes you a target. She let out a breath that trembled on the way out. I was going to take it to the FBI, she said. Walk in with everything. That was the plan. He nodded slowly. And the second you walk in that door, he will tell a story about a rogue nurse who hacked medical records and stole files to cover her own mistakes. He has logs. He has HR. He has lawyers. If the only copy of your story is on that phone and your laptop, he crushes it. He crushes you. So what do we do? She asked. We make sure you are not the only person who can tell this story, he said. We make sure that if anyone touches you, the same files land in places he cannot control. She watched him as he stood and went to his office. A few minutes later, he came back with a small black portable drive and a simple thumb drive. We back everything up, he said, more than once. We put copies where he cannot reach them. Then we talk to someone who understands how the law treats people who blow whistles in the wrong building. He spent the next hour on her laptop with her permission copying the folders she had built. The spreadsheet, the photos from the archive, the PDF of trial protocols she had downloaded. He saved them to the portable drive, then to the smaller one, then uploaded an encrypted file to a cloud account under a name that meant something only to him. Elena watched the progress bars move, a thin blue line creeping toward completion. What if they come here, she asked. They will not get everything, he said. By the time anyone knocks on this door, these files will already live in other places. He pulled out his phone and opened the encrypted app again, this time scrolling to a different name. Sam Holloway answered on the second ring. His voice was rough with sleep. Morgan, you better not be calling me to help you move a couch. Got something I need your brain on, Caleb said. Civilian hospital clinical trial, a lot of dead patients, a CEO with outside money, my wife in the middle, holding evidence. I know what this looks like in a war zone. I do not know what it looks like in a courtroom. Sam woke up fast. Caleb laid out the basics, careful with details but honest with the structure. He watched Elena's face as he talked, making sure she was still with him. On the other end of the line, Sam cursed softly. Your wife is sitting on a whistleblower case tied to healthcare fraud, he said, and she got there by technically breaking every privacy rule they are going to throw at her. She is right about one thing. If she walks in blind, their lawyers will try to flip the script. Is she protected at all? Caleb asked. Potentially, Sam said. If she can show she gathered what she did to report wrongdoing and not to sell it or use it for her own gain. If she can show a pattern of patient harm and cover-up. That is the kind of thing the feds like. But she needs counsel before she talks to any badge local or federal. We cannot afford to wait, Elena cut in. They just suspended me. He's already trying to erase me. You can move and be smart at the same time, Sam said through the speaker. Back up everything. Do not delete anything. Do not sign anything HR puts in front of you without a lawyer, and do not go to him alone again. When the call ended, Caleb set up one more layer. He sent the encrypted file link to 2 Marines he trusted more than most family men who had carried him bleeding into medevac helicopters and never asked for repayment. Each got only part of the password and a simple instruction. If Elena and I go silent for more than 48 hours, open this and send it to these addresses. He added the email for the Department of Justice Healthcare Fraud Unit, the local FBI field office, and 2 national newsrooms that had a record of digging instead of glossing. Elena watched him type. This is overkill, she said, but her voice held a note that was closer to relief than protest. It is insurance, he answered. In my world, we call it not having a single point of failure. The next day, her phone rang at 9 in the morning. The caller ID showed the main hospital number. She let it buzz twice, then picked up. This is Elena. Miss Ramirez. It was Greg from HR. His voice carried the careful warmth of an email apology. We have reviewed some preliminary information. Administration would like to meet with you to discuss your status. We think it is best to talk in person. Can you come in this afternoon? Her thumb pressed hard into the side of the phone. What kind of meeting? She asked. Just a conversation, he said. 19th floor, Dr. Stroud's office, 3 p.m. After she hung up, she stared at the blank wall for several seconds. He wants me on his floor, she said to Caleb. With his people, no lawyer, just me. You do not have to go, Caleb said. If I do not go, they will say I refuse to cooperate, she replied. They will use that. He looked at her wrist, at the bandage. The bruising had begun to fade into an ugly yellow, but he knew fresh damage sat deeper where no one could see. If you are going, he said, you are not going alone, even if I am not in the room. He pulled a small recorder from a drawer. It was the size of his thumb, matte, black with a single recessed button. He taped it to the underside of her scrubbed top, just below the neckline. Another transmitter he fixed behind her ID badge, the one she still had from before they took her access, the plastic cracked on one corner. "You sure this still works?" she asked, touching the badge. "It will get audio out," he said. "I will be parked close. I hear anything that sounds wrong, I call for help." He pressed his forehead to hers for a moment before she left. "Discuss staffing ratios," he said softly and managed a small smile. The executive floor felt different in daylight. That did not mean it felt safer. The receptionist waved her through again, eyes flicking once to the clock. Stroud's door was closed. She knocked and heard his voice invite her in. He was not alone. 2 people sat in chairs near the window, a woman with short blonde hair and a narrow face, and a man with a close-shaved head in a suit that did not quite fit his frame. Both had leather folders on their laps. Elena Stroud said, "Come in." "This is Ms. Klein and Mr. Cole, outside counsel for Northline Therapeutics. They are here to help us resolve a delicate situation." The phrase delicate situation made something in her jaw tighten. "Sit," he said. She sat at the single chair facing all 3 of them. The recorder under her shirt felt suddenly heavier. "We are aware that you have been accessing and removing confidential records related to the CardioVex 13 trial," Ms. Klein said. Her voice was crisp, photographing documents entering restricted spaces after hours taking protected health information off premises. Elena kept her hands in her lap. "I accessed records for patient safety reasons," she said. "I have documented evidence that this drug is associated with a cluster of deaths. You stole proprietary research materials," Mr. Cole said, "and compromised patient privacy in the process. Those are federal offenses." Stroud watched her silent fingers loosely laced. A sheet of paper slid across the desk toward her. It had her name at the top and a block of text beneath with signature lines at the bottom. "This is a termination and settlement agreement," Ms. Klein said. "You resign. You return all copies of any materials you took. You agree not to disparage the hospital or Northline. In exchange, we provide severance and a neutral reference. No charges are filed." "And if I do not sign?" Elena asked. "We will pursue criminal and civil remedies," Mr. Cole said. "You will face charges of theft, trespass, unauthorized access to protected health information. You will likely lose your license." Elena let the paper sit there. She pictured 3 patients, a mechanic who never got to see his granddaughter graduate, a woman who had just learned to say no to everyone but the person who wrote her orders, a young man whose mother still sent messages to his phone. "I have evidence of at least 14 deaths linked to this trial," she said. "I have logs. I have consent forms that were falsified. I have records of payments from Northline to a Delaware company that exists only on paper." Klein and Cole went very still. Stroud's gaze sharpened. "You are very sure of yourself," he said quietly. "I'm very sure of what I saw," she replied. "You think you can walk out of here and hand pieces of paper to someone, and they will believe you over a hospital, over a respected executive, over a major pharmaceutical company?" he asked. She met his eyes. "Yes," she said, "because I can show them what you did not just tell them." His jaw flexed once. "Meeting is over," he said. She stood. Her legs felt oddly light. As she walked out, she could feel the weight of their eyes on her back. In the stairwell, her breath finally came fast. She pressed her palm flat against the cool metal railing until her heartbeat slowed. The parking garage sat in a concrete hollow, its air colder than the street above. Her footsteps echoed as she crossed between rows. She was 3 cars away from the Subaru when 3 men stepped out from between vehicles ahead. They were dressed in jeans and jackets. Their haircuts reminded her of Caleb's old photos. Efficient, no extra. Ms. Ramirez, the one in front, said. His smile did not reach his eyes. "We need you to come with us. There is another meeting off-site." "I have another appointment," she said. Her voice sounded steady in her own ears. That surprised her. The man on the left shifted to block her path. She turned to move the other way. The third came up behind. Her fingers went for her phone. A hand hit her wrist, sending a fresh streak of pain up her arm. The phone flew from her grasp, hit the concrete, and skidded. She heard more than saw the crack of glass. "Do not make a scene," the front man said. "Nobody up there will hear you in time anyway." She took a step back and felt the cold surface of a pillar against her shoulder blades. For a second, the garage seemed to tilt. The smell of exhaust and cold metal filled her nose. Her injured wrist throbbed, and she clenched her other hand into a fist without thinking about what she would do with it. "Step away from her." The voice came from behind the men, clear and calm in a way that made all 3 turn at once. Caleb walked toward them from between 2 trucks. His hands were empty, visible, his shoulders relaxed. The tension sat low in the way he placed his feet, in the way his eyes never left the man closest to Elena. "This is private security business," the leader said. "You should keep walking." "Funny," Caleb said, "because it looks like 3 men surrounding my wife without her consent." The nearest man moved first hand, going to his jacket. Caleb closed the space in 2 long strides. His fingers wrapped the man's wrist, turning it outward at an angle that made the man grunt. A compact pistol came free. Caleb kicked it under a car without looking. The second swung at him, fist cutting through the air where Caleb's head had been a moment before. Caleb dropped his weight, drove his shoulder into the man's midsection, and took him to the concrete. The impact knocked the air out of the man in a rush. The third stepped back, eyes tracking the hidden pistol, then the approaching headlights at the far end of the ramp. Sirens wailed faintly, growing louder. The leader tried to twist out of Caleb's hold. Caleb shifted grip and guided him face first onto the hood of a parked car. Metal shook. The man swore. Elena pushed herself away from the pillar. Her wrists screamed, but she stayed upright. Red and blue lights washed the garage in color. Patrol cars pulled in tires, squealing slightly. Doors opened, shouts filled the space. Hands where we can see them. Officers swarmed the scene. Within seconds, plastic cuffs bit into the men's wrists. One of the officers, a sergeant with deep lines bracketing his mouth, looked from them to Caleb, then to Elena. "Anyone going to tell me what this is?" he asked. "They tried to force me to go with them," Elena said. Her voice shook now, the adrenaline ebbing. "I work upstairs. I just left a meeting with Dr. Stroud and attorneys for Northline Therapeutics. Ask them who hired these men." The sergeant glanced at the fallen pistol, then at the cracked phone on the ground. "You all right?" he asked her. "No," she said, "but I have something you need to hear." At the precinct, in a small interview room that smelled faintly of old coffee and disinfectant, she laid the recorder on the table. The detective plugged it into a laptop and put on headphones. As he listened, his posture shifted. He sat straighter. He rewound sections. His pen moved across his notepad, lines of ink fast and hard. When he took the headphones off, his face had changed. "This is not just an assault," he said. "This is conspiracy territory. With that drug trial, it touches federal law." He stood up, already reaching for the phone on the wall. "I am calling our contact at the field office," he said. "They are going to want every file you have." The FBI agent arrived before the coffee in the precinct had time to go stale. He wore a dark suit and a winter coat that still carried flecks of snow on the shoulders. His badge flashed once as he introduced himself, then disappeared back into his pocket. He sat across from Elena and Caleb in the small interview room, flipped open a notebook, and listened. Elena told the story again. The drug, the deaths, the records, Stroud's warning, the falsified access logs, HR, the basement, the files, the meeting with Northline's lawyers, the 3 men in the garage. Every time she reached for a detail, it was there. The habit of charting had carved dates and times into her memory. When she finished, the agent tapped his pen once on the table. "You understand," he said, "you are admitting to accessing and copying protected records." "I accessed them to prove harm," she replied. "To report a crime? I did not sell anything. I did not leak them to anyone before this." "And you have copies of everything you took," he asked, "and of your own work product?" Elena nodded. "On my laptop, and on drives, and in cloud storage my husband set up." The agent glanced at Caleb. "You do security?" he asked. Consulting, Caleb said, "Mostly for companies that do not want to admit they have already been broken into." "That explains the backup habits," the agent said. He sat back a little, considering. "Here's what happens," he said. "We will take your copies and we will get our own warrants for the originals. Hospital servers, trial files, bank records. If what you are telling me lines up, this is not just a bad study. This is fraud, possibly homicide. There are programs that protect people who bring these cases in. They are not perfect, but they exist. You are not the first nurse to walk into a mess someone richer created." Elena's shoulders eased a fraction. Not much. Enough. The next days moved in quick jumps, an early morning knock. Agents on Stroud's porch while the sky was still the color of steel. A neighbor's phone held at an upstairs window, recording as he stepped out in a robe face. Sleep swollen, then went still at the sight of badges and a warrant. At Mile High, medical staff arriving for day shift found agents already inside. They watched as boxes of files were carried out, hard drives bagged and labeled. IT staff sat in a conference room with laptops open, cursor blinking on server directories. In ICU, Maya and Ben stood at the central station and watched the procession. "Is that the feds?" Ben whispered. "Looks like it," Maya said. "About time someone put that floor under a microscope." News traveled faster than the official memos. By noon, headlines crawled along TV screens above the nurses' station. Denver Hospital CEO under federal investigation. Cardiac drug trial linked to patient deaths. A local reporter stood outside the hospital entrance, breath clouding the air. microphone trembling slightly in her gloved hand. Inside their apartment, Elena sat on the couch with the sound turned down. Caleb watched her more than the screen. When her own name scrolled in small letters along the bottom identified a source of internal complaint, her throat tightened. "They are going to know," she said quietly. "The families, the staff." "That you refuse to look away?" Caleb asked. "Yes. They will." The first real sign that the tide had shifted came in the form of a phone call from a number she did not recognize. "Ms. Ramirez," the voice said. "My name is Alvarez. I am with the Department of Justice Healthcare Fraud Section. I wanted to let you know that as of this morning, all criminal exposure related to your access of records is being declined. In plain language, we are not charging you. In fact, we may be calling you relator instead of suspect." She had to sit down on the edge of the bed. "So you believe me," she said. "We believe the documents," Alvarez replied. "They match what we are pulling from the hospital and Northline servers. Those payments you flagged the deaths, the altered logs. It paints a picture we cannot ignore." The hospital called later that week. This time it was not Greg from HR, but the interim CEO, a woman whose name Elena recognized from the board list. "We owe you more than an apology," the woman said. "But I will start there. What was done to you and to our patients under our roof is not acceptable. We are reinstating you fully with back pay. We would also like you to consider taking on a new role, Director of Patient Safety and Nursing Standards." Elena listened to the offer, then looked out the window. Snow had begun to fall again, settling on the branches of the bare tree outside. "I will come back," she said finally. "On my terms. I want a protected channel for staff to report concerns outside the hospital's direct control. I want a committee with people from outside the chain of command. I want the trial oversight structure rewritten." There was a pause on the line. "I think we can work with that," the interim CEO said. Going back into the building as an employee felt strange. The lobby smelled the same. The floor in ICU still squeaked in the same spot near bed 6. Yet people looked at her differently now. Some nodded like they were acknowledging a secret. Some stepped forward. Maya met her at the nurse's station stethoscope over one shoulder, hair pulled back. "You look taller," Maya said. "I feel tired," Elena replied. "That too," Maya said. "You came back. That helps." In the months that followed, Elena spent more time in conference rooms than at the bedside. She missed the rhythm of direct care, the beeps and sighs and quiet conversations at 2 a.m. But setting up structures felt like another kind of triage. She sat with lawyers and compliance officers and outside advocates. She helped design a reporting system that bypassed department heads, that sent certain kinds of complaints directly to an external firm and the board's audit committee. She insisted on anonymous feedback options, on retaliation protections with teeth. In quieter moments, she returned to ICU. She walked between beds, talked to nurses about workflows that made no sense and signs they had hesitated to mention before. She watched their hands on rails and syringes and keyboards. Those hands had always been the first and last line between a patient and whatever the world decided to throw at them. Outside the hospital, the investigation widened. Northline executives were subpoenaed. Internal emails surfaced. Phrases like acceptable loss and aggressive enrollment targets appeared in headlines. Congressional hearings called the company's leadership to Washington. Cameras flashed as men and women in suits walked into rooms lined with microphones and flags. Families of patients who had died after receiving CardioVec's 13 filed civil suits. Their lawyers called Elena to testify about what she had seen at the bedside and about what she had found in the records. Standing in court, her right hand raised, she noticed that the skin at her wrist had grown smooth again, the faint line of old bruising now almost invisible. The act of lifting her hand no longer hurt. Months turned into a year. The criminal case against Stroud and several others moved through motions and hearings until it arrived at sentencing. The federal courtroom in downtown Denver was high-ceilinged and cold. Wood benches flags the seal on the wall. Elena sat in the second row, Caleb beside her. In front of them, relatives of patients sat with photos in their hands or tucked into wallets. A woman in a blue dress clutched a program from her son's memorial service so tightly the paper crumpled at the edges. Stroud sat at the defense table in a gray suit, this time, without the polished accessories. His hair had grown out just enough to look unkempt. He stared straight ahead as the judge read the counts and the guidelines. 28 years, the judge said. No possibility of supervised release before 15 years served. The murmur that moved through the room was quiet, more exhale than cheer. As Marshall stepped forward, Stroud turned his head slightly. His gaze brushed past the families, then landed on Elena. For a second, the memory of his hand around her wrist flashed sharp and bright. The pressure, the pain, the choice he had offered. She did not look away. She did not nod. There was nothing in her expression for him to read. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded near the steps. Elena slipped past them with Caleb, their faces turned toward the street. Snow had started again, small flakes spinning in the city wind. 3 months later, the case still appeared in news segments and long articles. Podcasts recounted the story, setting dramatic music under timelines and interviews. One of them came to the small house on the edge of the city. The host sat at the kitchen table with a recorder between them, her headphones resting around her neck. Through the window, the Rockies were a blue shadow against a bright morning sky. The air smelled of coffee and toast. People listening are going to want to know, the host said. If you had known that first night in your bathroom when you saw the bruise where all of this would lead, would you have done the same thing? Elena thought about the ICU, about 3 beds that had filled with people who should have had more time, about the nights that followed the fear, the garage, the files spread out on her table. I think of who might be in those beds now, she said, and what they deserve. She did not add more. It felt sufficient. The host turned to Caleb. And you, she asked, watching from the side, being dragged into it. What have you taken from all this? Caleb glanced at Elena, then back at the recorder. I learned my wife is exactly who I thought she was, he said, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is not to pull them out of a fight, but to stand where they cannot see you and make sure no one shoots them in the back. Later, when the equipment was packed and the car pulled away, the house quieted. Elena and Caleb took their coffee out to the small porch. The morning was cool, but the sun was up, light spilling over the tops of the houses and catching on the distant snow. She wrapped both hands around the mug. Her right wrist looked like it always had before, ordinary, the faint scar only visible when the light hit it a certain way. They sat without talking for a while, listening to the faint rush of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, the soft clink of ceramic when she set her mug down on the railing. The kind of sounds that meant life was still going on. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.